Hello and welcome to TVB News. With Hong Kong's District Council set for a major overhaul, top officials and lawmakers showed their support for the reform in booths on the streets. Chief Executive John Lee also arrived at one of the booths in a bid to show his support. Timothy Lee tells us more.
Chants backing the district council reform were heard across Hong Kong today, with support from the chief executive. At 8 this morning, John Lee arrived at a booth outside Wan Chai Station, where he met Wan Chai District Officer Fanny Cheung. Under the reform plan, district officers will chair district councils. Lawmakers could be seen across the city passing out pamphlets to residents in a move to bolster public support for the district council revamp. In Causeway Bay, the Alliance to Support Improved District Administration, featuring lawmakers and community leaders, was launched on Patterson Street. Showing their support were Secretary for Security Chris Tang and Secretary for Health Lo Chung Mao, while Starry Lee, a National People's Congress Standing Committee member, served as the convener of the alliance. The DAB chairwoman stressed that the reforms were made to ensure better performance of district councillors and prevent power from falling into the hands of non-patriots.
There are two main reasons. One is to make sure a patriot administrating Hong Kong. And I think more important or equally important, we have to make district council a place that can do things for the general public. I have over 20 years of experience serving as a district councillor. I can see that really the people's council may not be even able to, do our hygiene issue properly.
Meanwhile, the Friends of Hong Kong Association also set up its own booth in Wan Chai to contribute to the effort. Today, there is a show of strong support for Hong Kong's district council revamp, with backing by top officials, lawmakers, and community leaders. They stress the revamp will increase the efficiency of district councillors and better serve the community. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
Secretary for Justice Paul Lam said district councils are district-based organizations as stipulated in the Basic Law, as distinct from the Legislative Council, which is an organ of political power that can monitor the government. Sheeran Tang reports.
On Tuesday, the government proposed sweeping changes to the formation and functions of the district councils. That, as the authorities stressed, the district councils must abide by Article 97 of the Basic Law. Today, Justice Secretary Paul Lam commented.
The two functions of district organization, namely to be consulted by the government on matters in relation to district administration, and secondly, to provide service on various areas.
Lam added, according to the law, setting up district organizations is not a must. He said these bodies exercise functions that are completely different from the Legislative Council, which is an organ of political power, which include monitoring the government and legislation. As to whether district councillors who oppose a government policy constitutes a violation to his or her duties, Lam said it will depend on individual circumstances. Lam also explained the legal issues behind the revamp of the councils.
We are in the course of amending or trying to reform 6 pieces of principal ordinances plus 14 subsidiary legislations. Now, these details will be announced when the drafting exercise is completed to ensure that these legislative provisions will reflect the true spirit and intention of Article 97.
Under the revamp, future district councillors will be subject to vetting. Secretary for Constitutional and Mainland Affairs Eric Tsang was asked on another occasion whether district councillors who previously resigned in relation to the requirement to swear allegiance to the SAR are qualified to run for office. Tsang said the administration welcomes all people who truly wish to serve the community and are loyal to the country, regardless of their party affiliations. Sharon Tang, TVB News.
U.S. courier FedEx announced it is moving its Asia-Pacific regional headquarters from Hong Kong to Singapore to allow more flexibility. It's been based in Hong Kong since 1992. The company plans to integrate part of the operations in the Asia-Pacific, Middle East, and African regions to Singapore. less than 15% of its 35,000 staff in the region will move to Singapore. Chairman of the Hong Kong Shippers Council, Willie Lin, believes the decision was made out of political considerations. He added the company's China headquarters is Shanghai, and the move does not mean FedEx is giving up on Hong Kong and Greater China. The police seized an exhibit in connection with incitement to subvert state power. Sources say the item is the Pillar of Shame, a statue that was previously placed in the University of Hong Kong. The statue had been in the HKU campus since the 1990s. The school's council moved the sculpture to the Hong Kong U Kadoorie Center in Yuen Long in 2021 after considering the item may risk violating the law. It's believed National Security Police confiscated the statue in Yuen Long after producing a court warrant. The exhibit is believed to be linked to a subversion case involving the Hong Kong Alliance in support of patriotic democratic movements of China. Several leaders of the group were arrested and charged in 2021. And Hong Kong's last 5 COVID testing centers and stations will shut down next Saturday. The Health Bureau said demand for coronavirus tests has significantly dropped recently, adding that the measure was taken in order to better utilize resources. Authorities also provided a list of designated medical facilities where residents could continue to get their COVID tests in the future. Some in the tourism sector stressed that most countries have already dropped the requirement for COVID results from visitors and that the government's move will not have a major effect on residents' travel plans. Russian drones attacked the Ukrainian capital Kiev on Thursday evening for the 4th time in as many days. This as the Ukraine leader speaking in the Netherlands called for a new international tribunal to be set up in The Hague to try Russian leaders over the invasion of Ukraine. Matthew Bray reports.
Kyiv was on high alert again as it came under attack from Russian drones. This tit-for-tat Russian behavior after a purported drone strike on the Kremlin on Wednesday that Moscow claims the United States orchestrated. Washington has denied the accusation. This footage is Ukraine shooting down one of its own drones after it started flying out of control over the capital. Ukraine's military command said 18 of 24 drones had been shot down. People sheltered in the Kyiv metro as the attacks wore on, witnesses saying the drones arrived more quickly than usual after alerts were declared. Ukraine leader Volodymyr Zelensky was in Holland, where he called for the Russian leadership to face an international tribunal for war crimes. Accompanied by Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte, Zelensky had this to say on Putin and Russia.
He's not the real leader of the country in which words or steps you can trust, yes. So for me, it doesn't matter what they think. We know what they do. We see their demotivated country on the battlefield, what is very important. We don't see ever the strong army on the battlefield and a really strong society which support their steps forward.
Zelensky also visited a military base at Sosterberg, where wounded Ukrainians are being treated for severe injuries and others trained how to use Patriot missile defense systems. On the battlefield, Ukraine troops are training for a long-talked-about counter-offensive. So far, it hasn't happened, and the war's front lines remain static. Russia holds 1/5 of Ukraine. Matthew Bray, TVB News.
There has been more violence in Serbia. Police have arrested a 21-year-old gunman who killed at least 8 people and wounded 14 others in a drive-by attack late Thursday. The shooting comes a day after a 13-year-old boy used his father's gun to kill 8 fellow students and a guard at a school in the country's capital, Belgrade, the country's first mass shooting in 10 years. Tracy Furness reports.
Serbian police said they arrested a man identified by initials UB early Friday near the central town of Kragujevac, about 100 kilometers south of Belgrade. The arrest followed an all-night search by hundreds of police officers who sealed off an area south of Belgrade where the shooting took place late Thursday. The suspect shot randomly at people in villages near Mladenovac, some 50 kilometers south of the capital. This local resident said, "I heard some tack-tack-tack sounds. At first I thought someone gave birth, that there might be a newborn, but it wasn't that. Shame, great shame." Meanwhile, hundreds of school children and adults carrying candles and flowers mounted a vigil in streets around the school in Belgrade, where a 13-year-old boy killed 8 pupils and a security guard in a hallway on Wednesday. This Belgrade resident said, although such incidents are not unheard of, the horror of it is indescribable. We were aware that our society is capable of such events, but the possibility of such an escalation among elementary school children was unforeseen. The shooter later surrendered to police. Serbian Interior Minister Bratislav Gašić called Thursday's shooting a terrorist act. The bloodshed over the past 2 days has sent shockwaves through this Balkan nation scarred by wars but unused to mass murders. Tracy Furness, TVB News.
Coming up, top diplomats discuss global and regional issues in Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting. New York court found Ed Sheeran did not copy Marvin Gaye's song. Recruitment starts for police officers after selection criteria is lowered. Welcome back. Foreign ministers from member countries of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization are gathering in the Indian coastal resort of Goa for diplomatic talks. Foreign Minister Qin Gang met with his Indian and Russian counterparts on the sidelines of the summit. Daniel Rao reports.
A flurry of bilateral talks were held as the Shanghai Cooperation Organization gathers in Goa in India. The SCO is a political and security union of countries spanning much of Eurasia, including China, India, Pakistan and Russia, and is seen as a counterweight to Western influence in Eurasia. Today, Chinese Foreign Minister Qin Gang met with his Indian counterpart Subrahmanyam Jaishankar. The meeting came amid a tense situation along the disputed border between the two countries. There, a 3-year standoff has involved thousands of soldiers stationed in the eastern Ladakh region. Qin said the border situation was stable overall and that both sides should abide by existing agreements to promote the further cooling and easing of the border situation. Qin also met with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. Qin said China would continue to promote peace talks on Ukraine and maintain communication with Russia to make tangible contributions to political settlement of the crisis. Lavrov noted that Russia is ready to work with China to bring their bilateral ties to a higher level. He added that Russia agrees with China's principled position on the conflict in Ukraine. Meanwhile, the foreign ministers of India, Russia and Pakistan called for a representative government in Afghanistan and the protection of women's rights almost 2 years after the Islamist Taliban swept to power. Daniel Rao, TVB News.
Canada may expel a Chinese diplomat for allegedly plotting to intimidate the Hong Kong relatives of a Canadian member of Parliament. Canadian intelligence reported that Conservative Michael Chong was targeted after he criticized China's human rights record. Canada's Foreign Minister Melanie Joly summoned the Chinese ambassador, who denied the allegations. The Foreign Ministry in Beijing called Ottawa's position unwarranted slander. Canada's Globe and Mail newspaper, citing a 2021 intelligence report, said China sought information on Chong and his family. Vice President Han Zheng is in London, where he will attend the coronation ceremony of King Charles III on Saturday. Last night, Han was speaking at a welcome dinner hosted by Chinese and British business communities in the English capital. On China-Britain relations, Han stressed that as China's modernization advances, bilateral cooperation will surely embrace a brighter future. He urged for joint efforts to build a healthy and stable Sino-Britain relationship so as to provide a solid foundation for mutually beneficial cooperation. With less than 24 hours before the coronation of King Charles III, London security is ramping up as large crowds are expected to line the streets before the formal ceremonies begin. Final preparations are taking place in London before the coronation of King Charles in Westminster Abbey. Roads were cordoned off and police conducted security checks as guests from around the world start arriving for the ceremony. Across the capital, shops and public areas are bedecked with Union flag bunting and street parties are planned. An announcement by King Charles and Queen Camilla wishing people a happy coronation weekend was heard on the underground. Wherever you're traveling, we hope you have a safe and pleasant journey, Camilla says. King Charles adds, remember, please mind the gap. A jury in New York has concluded that British singer and songwriter Ed Sheeran's hit song, Thinking Out Loud, did not copy key components of Marvin Gaye's classic tune, Let's Get It On.
I'm obviously very happy with the outcome of the case, and it looks like I'm not having to retire from my day job after all. But at the same time, I'm unbelievably frustrated that baseless claims like this are allowed to go to court at all.
Darling, I will. The verdict came after a 2-week trial. The singer insisted that the copyright claim was a threat to all musicians who write their own songs. Sheeran was sued by the heirs of songwriter Ed Townsend, who created the 1973 classic with Gaye. Sheeran is believed to be worth $210 million as of 2023. In the U.S., 4 members of the far-right extremist group Proud Boys have been convicted of a plot to attack the U.S. Capitol, which was a desperate bid to keep Donald Trump in power after the Republican lost the 2020 presidential election. This report from NBC News.
Prosecutors called them the key instigators of the January 6th assault on the U.S. Capitol.
American citizens are storming the Capitol.
After a 3-month trial, a jury tonight has found 5 members of the notorious extremist group the Proud Boys guilty of most of the charges against them. 4 of the 5 defendants, including the group's former leader, Enrique Tarrio, were convicted of seditious conspiracy, a Civil War-era law making it a crime to violently resist the authority of the U.S. government. 4 were convicted of trying to obstruct the certification of President Biden's Electoral College victory, and all 5 were convicted of interfering with the duties of members of Congress, many of whom found themselves running for their lives on January 6th.
Today's verdict makes clear that the Justice Department will do everything in its power to defend the American people and American democracy.
The evidence coming in some cases from the defendants' own mouths.
January 6th will be a day in infamy.
The significance of the verdict in this case definitely goes not only to these defendants, but to others as well in other investigations.
Prosecutors have not established that the Capitol attack was planned in advance, but told jurors the defendants set out that day to act as Donald Trump's army, trying to illegally keep the former president in power.
Proud Boys, stand back and stand by.
Citing that infamous comment during a 2020 presidential debate, defense attorneys blamed Trump, asserting their commander-in-chief sold them a lie.
And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
The jury couldn't decide on some counts, but the 5 Proud Boys face decades in prison based on today's verdict.
Back locally, starting today, residents who are interested in joining the police force will face lower hurdles, including the removal of minimum height and weight criteria. The change applies to police constables, probationary inspectors, and auxiliary police constables. Mimo Sangai reports.
This is the police recruitment center at the Wan Chai Police Headquarters. Some digital advertisements are displayed outside the center with information on the recruitment venue and benefits of being part of the police force. This slide shows benefits for inspectors, such as the number of annual holidays. This morning, some candidates arrived at the recruitment center, but not all were ready to apply. This man made enquiries and decided to chat with the recruitment staff first before making his decision later. Unlike this person who dressed formally, who filled in some paperwork and provided his identity card. Earlier this week, the police force announced some entry requirements will be adjusted for applicants from Friday, such as the removal of minimum height and weight criteria, the cancellation of unaided visual acuity tests. There's also a newly introduced recruit police constable written examination. The purpose of the written examination, consisting of a general Chinese and English test, is to give applicants another way to meet the language proficiency requirements.
The group interview is one of the first steps of the police recruitment process, with 2 on-site interviews from Tuesday to Friday at 1 p.m. and 6:30 p.m. daily. Mimosanai, TVB News.
Observations of data from the Zhurong rover have shown there may be liquid water on Mars. This means the planet could potentially provide a suitable environment for human survival. Liquid water is of great significance to interstellar immigration and the understanding of the climate evolution of modern Mars. In 2021, the Zhurong rover, on board China's Tianwen-1 Mars mission, landed on the southern edge of the Utopia Planitia, found on the low-latitude region of Mars. After working over 350 Martian days, the Zhurong rover managed to obtain a large amount of scientific data. In sports, Napoli won their first Serie A title in 33 years after drawing 1-1 against Udinese. The point earned from the match gave Napoli an insurmountable 16-point lead over second-place Lazio with 5 matches still to play. The result prompted jubilation in the streets of Naples as fans filled the streets, waving flags and flares. The late football legend Diego Maradona had been instrumental in the team's only previous Italian title wins in 1987 and 1990, respectively. That's the news. Have a great weekend. Bye for now.